Brahmanda Purana, Part 1, Section 1, Purva Bhaga, Prakriya Pada. Chapter 1, Contents of the Brahmanda Purana. The footnote says, the present Purana is called the Brahmanda as God Brahma narrated it with special reference to Brahmanda. The term Brahmanda connotes a mixture of ancient Indian concepts about cosmography, cosmology, and cosmogony. In the Narada Purana 109.1, it is said to be an ancient Purana dealing with the events of the Adi Kalpa. It contains a number of verses and chapters common to the Vayu Purana, which led Kirfel to propose a theory of common origin of the Brahmanda Purana and Vayu Purana. Purana Panchalakshana. Perhaps the wording of the Kurma Purana 1.1.15 might have led him to think so, but it misled M. Ali to believe that the geographical section of this Purana appears to be a late copy about 130 AD of the Vayu, with slight alterations and modifications introduced by the copyist. Geography of the Puranas, page 8. But the statement in the Brahmanda Purana and the Narad Purana about the oral transmission of the Brahmanda Purana makes it clear that this is an independent work with Vayu as a narrator of this Purana, and it need not be confused with the Vayu Purana. The problem, however, will be discussed in the introduction. But I must acknowledge that the text of the identical and similar verses in Vayu Purana and Brahmanda Purana helped me to amend or correct a number of printing mistakes in the Brahmanda Purana which would have otherwise remained obscure. Arrival of Suta Romaharshana at the sacrificial session at Kurukshetra, requested by sages thereof to recite the Purana. Suta recites the Brahmanda Purana, beginning with its contents. Obeisance to the self-born deity, consisting of the quality of Sattva on the occasion of annihilation, born deity of threefold forms, viz. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Victorious is Lord Hari, who sustains the worlds, who is unborn, who is omnipresent and possessed of the three qualities, yet is also devoid of them. I seek refuge in God, Brahma, the creator of the world, who is omniscient, unvanquished, who is the Lord of everything past, present, and future, and who is the real master of all. Four things are to be restored to be the good, namely the unparalleled knowledge and detachment and superhuman power and virtue found in full form in case of the Lord of the universe. The Lord, unknowing that these human dispositions always consist of the good and the evil, created them again, indeed without hesitation, avishankaha, for the sake of performance of religious actions. The creator of the world, who knows full well the reality about the world and is conversant with yoga, resorted to yoga and created all living beings, mobile and immobile. I am desirous of knowing the Puranic narrative, and so I seek refuge in the mighty Lord, the creator of the universe. the witness of the worlds and the supreme all-pervading ruler. That Prajapati, lord of all creatures, Lord Brahma, recounted to Vasishtha the entire Purana that is on a par with the Vedas, and the main theme of which is the real state of the universe. The footnote says 55.8 to 17 give the line of transmission of the Brahmanda Purana as follows. God Brahma to sage Vasishtha, Parasara, Jatukarnya, Dvaipayana Vyasa, Suta to Lo or Romaharshana. An important point to note is the missing link of the Vayu here. Narad Purana 109.35 states Vyaso Labdhva Tataschaitat Prabhanjana Muktodgatam. That is, according to Narad Purana, Jatukarnya, Vayu or Prabhanjana Vyasa is the proper parampara, line of oral transmission. This Lachana is, however, indirectly supplied in 5.36b below, where the wind god Matarishwan is stated to be a narrator. Another point is the emphatic claim of the Purana to a status equal to the Veda. And the third point is about the main object of the Purana, viz. To explain the real state or reality of the world, Loka Tattva. 55, 1 to 8, 12, etc. The holy sage Vasishtha taught to his grandson Parasara, the son of Shakti, this sacred Purana, which is the nectar of the knowledge of reality. The holy Lord Parashara at first taught sage Jatukarnya this divine Purana that is on a par with the Vedas. After learning the Purana, the learned Jatukarnya transferred the knowledge of the supreme eternal Brahman to Dvaipayana. The footnote says Jatukarnya or Jatukarna was a self-controlled sage, a member of Yudhishthira's court, Mahabharata Sabha 4.14. One wonders why the Mahabharata and other Puranas do not furnish more details about him who taught this Purana to Dvaipayana Vyasa. Secondly, Parasara teaches this Purana to Jatukarnya and not to his own son Vyasa. Dvaipayana, the son of Parashara, and Satyavati, popularly known as Vyasa, the arranger, due to his classification of the floating traditional mantras into 4 Vedas. He was named Dvaipayana as he was kept in an island in the Yamuna. Nyasto Dvipe sa yad balas tasmad Dvaipayanaha smritaha. Mahabharat Adi 63.86. In the Pali canon also, we are told that one of the 8 ways of naming a person is his geographical residence. Dvaipayana was delighted thereby that self-controlled sage passed on the knowledge of that extremely wonderful Purana, the content of which was the knowledge of the real state of the world. For the sake of propagating it in the worlds, he taught this Purana, which is highly esteemed like the Vedas and which contains many topics, to Jaimini, Sumantu, Vaisampayana, Pailava, who was the 4th among them, and Lomaharshana, the 5th. He, Lomaharshana, was otherwise called Suta. He was humble, righteous, and pure. His modes of narration were extremely wonderful. The footnote says Vyasa seems to have taught this Purana, presumably others also, to his 5 disciples, but Jaimini, Sumantu, Vaisampayana, and Paila took interest in the Veda, leaving the preservation of the Puranic lore to Suta, Lo or Romaharshana. According to Vayu Purana 1.16, he is called Romaharshana as he made the hair of his audience bristle by his eloquent narration. After learning the Purana, Lomaharshana became humbler. He became extremely intelligent and virtuous. He was approached and questioned by a sage like you regarding matters of mythology, etc. He had the most excellent self control. Along with the other sages, he used to bow down to the sages after circumambulating them. He was endowed with great devotion. After acquiring learning, he became satisfied and went to Kurukshetra. He humbly approached the pure sages who were performing the elaborate sacrificial session. The footnote says this Purana is re-narrated at Kurukshetra where sages held a sacrificial session. The performance of the Satra met Romaharshana, that is Lomaharshana, with great humility. He excelled them in intellect, but as laid down in the scriptures, he bowed down duly to them. The footnote says this Suta is not a Brahmin. He was the Pratiloma offspring of a Kshatriya father and a Brahmin mother. Wide Gautama Dharma Sutra 4.15, Bodhayana 1.9.9 and Smritis of Manu 10 to 11, Yaggavalkya 1.93. Hence, this formality on his part. In 5.21, the term of greeting him is Anamaya and not Kushala. And in the case of Brahmanas, according to Gautama Dharma Sutra 55.37 to 38, guests of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya castes should be respectively greeted with the words Kushala, Anamaya and Arogya. Manu also 2.127 prescribes Brahmanam Kushalam Prachet Kshatriya Bandhum Anamayam. On seeing Romaharshana, then all those sages were extremely pleased. They were glad and all their minds became happy. They worshipped him with all necessary requisites of hospitality such as arghya, materials of worship, padya, water for washing the feet. He paid respects to all the sages. He received the permission of the king. After permitting him, the sages inquired him of his health. He approached all those sages individually, considering them to be the eternal Brahman. The great splendor, when the assembled persons indicated their consent, he sat on a beautiful, well covered seat. When he had taken his seat, all the sages of praiseworthy holy vows, well disciplined according to religious rules, and of calm and concentrated minds, became delighted and surrounded him who was an observer of great religious vows. With deep love and reverence, they spoke to him as follows: Welcome to you, O highly fortunate one. How glad are we, the residents of this place, to see you, the best of sages of excellent vows, hale and hearty, O intelligent one. Thanks to you, the performer of meritorious holy rites. I no longer consider this earth a void, O Suta. You are the disciple of that noble souled sage Vyasa. You are intelligent and you are always worthy of his blessings. You are fully equipped with the good qualities of a genuine disciple. You are learned and educated. Since you are worthy of being blessed, O Holy Lord, You have understood the principles. After having attained vast knowledge, you are free from doubts in every respect. O wise one, it always behoves you to recount to us everything that we ask you. We wish to hear the divine story of the Purana that is on a par with the Shrutis and that is full of righteous topics. This has already been heard by you from Vyasa. On being requested thus by the sages, then the excessively intelligent Suta, endowed with humility, offered an excellent reply full of modesty. Thus, whatever intellect I possess is due to the service I rendered to the sage. It is certainly true that my intellect should be utilized for serving others. That being the situation, O excellent Brahmanas, I shall recount whatever is possible for me. It behoves you to ask questions on any topic which you desire to know. On hearing his sweet utterance, the sages again replied to Suta, whose eyes welled with tears of joy. You are particularly well versed in the details of this topic. You have seen Vyasa personally. Hence, you explain the origin of the world completely. The footnote says this is indicative of the title Brahmanda Purana. We wish to know who was born in which family. We wish to know the details of the family and ancestry of the kings, sages, etc. Kindly recount the wonderfully diversified creative activity of Prajapati during the days of yore. Thus was the excellent and noble-souled Romaharshana requested after offering him due hospitable reception. That excellent most Suta narrated everything in detail and in due order. Suta said, O excellent Brahmanas, I shall recount in due order that sacred story which Dvaipayana, who was pleased with me, had narrated to me. O Brahmanas, I shall expound the Purana that had been related by Matarishvan, the wind god, on being asked by the noble souled sages of Naimisha forest. The footnote says it means the wind god did not teach it to Dvaipayana. Secondly, the present text is rehash of the Purana narrated at Naimisharanya. This is modern Nimsar at a distance of 20 miles from Sitapur and 45 miles to the northwest of Lucknow. The word Naimisha is derived from two different words. Nimisha, the twinkling of the eye, and Nemi, the felly of a will. According to one, this place came to be called Naimisha as Vishnu killed an army of Asuras within the twinkling of an eye at this place. Wide Sridhara on Brahmanda Purana 1.1.4, where he quotes VRP as his authority. According to 2, which is accepted here in Infra 1.1.2.8, God Brahma, to ensure a sacred place for a sacrifice for sages, created mentally a will which went on running till it reached the vicinity of the Gomati river, near which its felly broke down and it stopped. The sages who followed it to that place accepted it for their sacrificial session. This popular etymology from Nemi is endorsed by Vayu Purana 1.2.8, Devi Bhagavat Purana 1.2.28 to 32, where it adds that Kali cannot enter that place. It was at this place that Rama performed his horse sacrifice. We are 7.91.15. Although there was another Naimisharanya in Kurukshetra, wide Chandogya Upanishad 1.2.13 and Kataka Samhita 10.6. And although the Aryan expansion was from the west to the east, the Naimisharanya on the Gomati appears to be the birthplace of Puranas. A Purana is characterized by five topics, viz. Sarga, primary creation; Pratisarga, dissolution and recreation; Vamsa, lineage of kings, etc.; Manvantaras, the regions of Manus or Manu periods; and Vamshanucharita, chronological description of kings and sages. The footnote says the five characteristics of a Purana is found in 5.37b and 38a, which should have formed one continuous verse, as is found in other Puranas, are mentioned in many other references. Amarasam Simha, 5th century AD, has records this verse in his Amar Kosha 1.6.5. Although these characteristics have been unanimously accepted as essential parts of the Puranas, the Purana texts that have come down to us hardly conforms to this definition. The Historian and Culture of the Indian People, Volume 3, page 292. If the original Purana texts conformed to this description, the present texts of the Puranas must have been revised or mutilated during their transmission. The first Pada section of this Purana is called Prakriya Pada, section on rites. In this section, there is the summing up of the story. The other sections are Anusanga, consequence; Upodghata, introduction; and Upasamhara, conclusion. Thus, the four sections are briefly mentioned by me. I shall narrate them in detail later on and in the proper order. At the outset, the Purana among the sacred scriptures was heard by Brahma. The Purana writers claim their priority in creation and hence superiority to the Vedas. That some tract of literature called Purana existed at the time of the Atharva Veda is clear from AV.9, AV 11.7.24, 15.1.6, but the tall claim of being heard by God Brahma before he heard any Shastras before the creation of the Veda is historically hardly justifiable. Thereafter, the Vedas came out of his mouth. Similarly, the Vedangas, ancillary subjects, and Dharma Shastras, law codes, and sacred rites, and holy observances also came out. Then the decision, I will create the entire universe, beginning with Mahat, the great principle, and ending with Vishesha, the particular creations of worldly objects by the unmanifest cause which is eternal and of the nature of Sat, existent, and Asat, non-existent. The footnote says 55.42 to 44 treat briefly the evolution of the universe, obviously on the basis of Sankhya system. As the following topics are given as table of contents, their special explanations will be given in their respective chapters. The golden cosmic egg and the excellent birth of Brahma. The Avarana, the covering sheath of the egg, was the ocean. The covering of the waters by the Tejas, the fiery element. The enclosure of the Tejas by the gaseous element. Then the encircling of the gaseous element by the ether. Its covering by Bhutadi, ego. The Bhutadi is encircled by Mahat, the great principle, and the Mahat is encircled by Avyakta, the unmanifest one. The egg itself has been described as situated within the enclosure of the elements. The appearance of the rivers and the mountains is described here. There is a description of all the Manvantaras and the Kalpas, the narration of the tree of Brahman. The birth of Brahma is then recounted. After this is the description of the creation of the subjects by Brahma. Here the avasthas, situations, are described of God Brahma, whose birth is unmanifest. The occurrence of the kalpas, the stabilization of the universe, Hari's lying down in the waters, and the uplift of the earth. The particular description of the cities, etc., the classification of castes and stages of life, the positions of the stars and the planets and their transit from one zodiacal sign to another, and the abode of the siddhas and their distance in yojanas in details, and the allocation of places in the heaven to men of auspicious conduct. The narration of the different species of trees, medicinal herbs, and creepers, the two paths, viz. Of the devatas, deities, and of the sages, are then described. The creation and manifestation of mango and other trees, the origin of animals and human beings, is then narrated. The definition as well as its total components of kalpa are mentioned. Then the nine types of international creations. Then the nine types of intentional creations by God Brahma are described. Three of the intentional creations are mentioned in details. The arrangement of the worlds, the origin of dharma, etc., from the limbs of Brahma. The description of the 12 that are born again and again in the Prajakalpa, Pratisandhi, the period of transition between two kalpas, is mentioned. The origin of adharma due to God Brahma's envelopment by tamas, and the creation of Purusha from his Brahma's body with preponderance of sattva guna. Similarly, the birth of Shatarupa and the birth of the two sons, viz. Priyavrata, Uttanapada, as well as that of the auspicious Prasuti and Akuti. Those who had rid themselves of sins and are well established themselves in the three worlds are glorified. Afterwards, the birth of twins in Akuti from Ruchi, then Prajapati. The auspicious births of Daksha's daughters from Prasuti, then the procreation by the great souled Dharma from Daksha's daughters like Shraddha, as in Vayu Purana, a race characterized by Sattva Guna and was as if the dawn of happiness, as well as the race of Adharma, evil, from Himsa, violence, characterized by Tamoguna and inauspiciousness. The description of the creation of subjects by Bhrigu and other sages, wherein the lineage of the Brahmana sage Vasishtha is recounted. The birth of the progeny of Agni from Swaha is recounted there. Thereafter, the birth of subjects of the two types of Pitras in Swadha is also mentioned. In the context of the description of the line of the Pitras, the curse of Daksha by Maheshwara, Sati, and Bhrigu and other intelligent ones is mentioned. So also the return curse uttered by Daksha, the protest against the enmity by Rudra of wonderful feats because defects were seen, is described. In the context of Manvantaras, time with its units is recounted in detail. The auspicious characteristics of the daughter of Kardama, the Prajapati, the details of the sons of Priyavrata are described there. Their appointment on different continents and lands severally are recounted. The narration of the creation of Swayambhuva Mano, so also the description of the Varshas, subcontinents, and rivers and their different types. How thousands of the different continents comprise the group of seven Dvipas, the detailed description of the mandala encircling zone of Jambudvipa and the ocean. The magnitude and extent of the Jambudvipa, the ocean and the mountains is mentioned in the form of yojanas. Yojana equals 12 kilometers. The following seven mountains, viz. Himavan, Hemakuta, Nishadha, Meru, Nila, Shweta, and Shringen are glorified. The footnote says the mountain system of the Puranas, as recorded here, is represented under the following names today: Himavan, the great Himalayan range; Hemakuta, Ladakh, Kailash, Trans Himalayan chain; Nishadha, Hindu Kush, Kunlun chain; Meru, the Pamirs; Nila. The distance between pairs of these, the girth, height, and extent of these mountains, all these are mentioned, is so many yojanas. The footnote continues: Shweta, Nura, Tau, Turkestan, Advashi chain; Shringin or Shringavan, Karatau, Kyrgyz, Ketman chain. For details, wide M. Ali, Geography of the Puranas, Chapter 3. The progressive contraction of Bharata up to 1947 AD blinds us to the fact that a large part of what is Central Asia today was an integral part of the Bharata of the Puranic world. The distance between pairs of these, the girth, height, and extent of these mountains, all these are mentioned, is so many yojanas. The inhabitants of these mountains are recounted. Bharata and other subcontinents are described, along with the rivers and mountains therein. How they are inhabited by the mobile and the immobile living beings. Jambudvipa and other islands, continents are surrounded by seven oceans. Thereafter, the golden earth and Loka mountain is described. These worlds have definite extents and magnitudes, consist of seven continents. Rupa, form, color, etc. are described because they are also made along with the Prakritas, effects of the Prakriti. All these are partial transformation of the Pradhana. The movement, extent, etc. of the sun, the moon, and the earth are succinctly yet completely stated without leaving out anything of importance. The dimensions are mentioned. The extent of these is mentioned in so many yojanas. Mahendra and other splendid and sacred mountains on the summit north of the Manasa lake are described, along with the present beings that are in possession of them and that identify themselves with them. The sun's movement above these, like a firebrand moving in a circle, has been mentioned. The characteristics of Nagavithi and Akshavithi are mentioned. The description of the two Koshtha, a misprint, quarters, of course, of winds, the two Lekhas, horizons or Lekhas, deities, and the zones in yojanas of the Loka mountain of the twilight of the day and of the Vishuvat equinox. The Lokapalas, guardians of the quarters, who stay on it in the four quarters are described. The southern and the northern path ways of the Pitras, mains, and gods are described. The goal of householders and those who renounce, that is, sannyasins, dependent on Rajas and Sattva, is mentioned. The region of Vishnu, where Dharma and others are stationed, is mentioned. The movement of the sun and the moon, as well as that of the planets and luminaries, is described. It has the efficacy of according auspiciousness as well as inauspiciousness to the subjects. The chariot of the sun, built by Brahma himself for the sake of a dwelling unto the sun, is mentioned. The chariot whereby the Lord goes to his abode from the heaven is prescribed from the heaven is presided over by the Devas, the Adityas, the sages, the Gandharvas, the Apsaras, the Gramanis, the serpents, and the Rakshasas. The rasa, juice, that exudes from the chariot evolved out of the essence of the waters is mentioned. The waxing and the waning of the moon caused by Soma are mentioned. The movement of the chariots of the sun and others begins from Dhruva, the pole star. The heavenly porpoise at the tail end of which the pole star is stationed is also described. All the constellations of stars, along with the planets wherein the gods of meritorious acts have their abodes, are described. The thousand rays of the sun, the asylum of rain, chillness and heat, the different classes of rays with reference to names, functions, and places of operation, all these are mentioned. The magnitude and the movement of the planets depending on the sun are mentioned. The origin of the Mahat, great principle, from the Pradhana, the characteristics of which are compared to a dancing girl. The narration of the greatness of Pururavas, the son of Ela, the greatness of Pitras of two types as well as that of the dead. Then the Parvans, important days in the transit of the moon, such as first quarter, full moon, last quarter, new moon, as well as the Sandhis, junctions of the Parvans, are narrated. The great blessing of the two types of Pitras by means of Shraddha, the Pitras who have gone to the heaven and those who have had a downfall. Their number and extent of yugas as well as the yuga called Krata are described. The introduction and commencement of agricultural activities, etc., as means of livelihood is the Treta Yuga as a result of the lowering of standards, the establishment of castes and stages of life based on dharma, duty, establishment of the institution of yajna, the conversation of Vasu and the sages, the downfall of Vasu, all these are recounted. The footnote says this verse Vayu Purana 1.111, but it reads Yojana, but it reads Yajna Pravartana. This is the proper reading and hence accepted, as Vajra Pravartana is baseless and hence probably a misprint. The text translated above Shabdatvam cha Pradhanat tu Swayambhuvam Mrite Manum is confusing. This verse Vayu Purana 1.112, which however gives a better reading. Prashnanam Durvachastvam cha Swayambhuvam Mrite Manum. The penance is praised, and so also the situations of the yugas entirely. The succinct description of the Dwapara and Kali ages. Manvantara is recounted and its number of years is narrated according to human calculation. This alone is the characteristic feature of all Manvantaras. The past, present, and future Manvantaras are recounted. So, also is the definition of Pratisandhana, period of transition between two Manvantaras. The past and the future reigning members in the Swayambhuva Manvantara are recounted. The movement of the sages is mentioned, so also the way of the knowledge of Kala time, the extent of the number of Durgas fortresses, the extent of the number of Durgas fortresses, and the commencement and the different professions for livelihood in the yugas, the birth and characteristic features of the emperors in the Treta, the birth of Pramati, the diminution by angulas of the living beings in the Kali Yuga, these are mentioned. The enumeration of the different sakhas, branches of the Vedas, the importance of the disciples, the seven types of vakyas, sentences, and narration of the spiritual lines of the sages, the characteristic features of the sons of charioteers and those of the Brahmanas are described in full. The classification of the Vedas by the noble souled Veda Vyasa is also given. The narration of the Devas and the lords of subjects in the Manvantaras, the due order of the Manvantaras, and the knowledge of Kala time, all these are recounted. The grandsons of Daksha, the splendid progeny of his beloved daughter, the children procreated by Brahma and others, and the children begot by the intelligent Daksha, the Savarna Manus who had resorted to Meru are also recounted here. The description of the creation of subjects by Dhruva, the son of Uttanapada, the creative activity of Chakshusha Manu, the description of the prowess of the subjects, the act of milking the earth by the Lord King Prithu, the son of Vena, the special mention of the vessels, milks, and calves, the fact that this earth had already been milked by Brahma and others. The birth of Daksha, the intelligent Prajapati, from the 10 Prachetasas in Marisha, as occurring through equal part of every one of them is described. The lordship over the past, present, and future things of Mahindras is recounted. The Manus and others who are covered with Manu narratives will be described. The detailed creative activity of Vaivasvata Manu is recounted. The origin of Bhrigu and others in the vestures of Brahma and others is narrated. The footnote says Vayu Purana 1.128 reads Brahma Sukrat from the semen of God Brahma, as distinguished from the splendid Prajasarga, creation of the subjects of Chakshusha Manu, the creation through mediation by Daksha in the Vaivasvata Manvantara is recounted. Narada, the mental son of Brahma, engaged the extremely powerful sons of Daksha in conversation and destroyed them and was cursed as a result. Thereupon Daksha begot the well-known daughters named Vairinas, the birth of Marut in the noble lady Diti in the course of the continuous blowing of the wind. The 7 times 7, 49 groups of Maruts are recounted here. They acquired Devatva, state of being Devas, because of their staying along with Indra. Their residence is the shoulders of Vayu. The origin of the Daityas, Danavas, Yakshas, Gandharvas, Rakshasas, ghosts and evil spirits of the Yakshas, birds, creepers, etc. is recounted. The origin of the Apsaras is narrated in great details. The entire sphere of the sun is described, and also the birth of the elephant Airavata, the birth of Vainateya, Garuda, as well as his installation as a king of birds. The detailed narratives of the race of Bhrigos and the Angiras are recounted. The detailed description of the progeny of Kashyapa, Pulastya, noble souled Atri, and sage Parasara, three girls in whom the worlds are stabilized, are glorified. The detailed description of Ichha of Aditya is found thereafter. The footnote says to be amended as Ila, as in Vayu Purana 1.141, as there is no person called Ichha in this context in the Puranas. The story of King Kuvit is mentioned. The annihilation of Brihadvalas by Dhruva is mentioned. Ikshvaku and others are glorified briefly. The footnote says Vayu Purana 1.141b to 142a reads the description of Dhundhu, Ikshvaku and others ending with Brihadbala are described. Dhruva is not credited with destroying Brihadbala's wide P. Puranic encyclopedia on Dhruva and Brihadbala. The creation of the king, Nishi, etc. is mentioned in detail along with Palandu, Harana, etc. The story of the king Yayati's race. The description of Yadu's race and the detailed narration of Haya after Krodha. Afterwards, the details of the race are mentioned. The footnote says this should be Kroshtu and not Krodha, White Vayu Purana 1.144. The greatness of Jyamagha and his creation of subjects is recounted. So also Deva Vridha, Andhaka and noble souled Drashti. The lineage of Animitra, the false accusation of the two Vaishyas, the ascertainment and the acquisition of the jewel by the intelligent Satrajit in the course of the creation of progeny by the saintly king of Deva Midvan. The birth and story of the noble souled Sura is mentioned. The wickedness of Kamsa and the birth of Vasudeva Vishnu, of unmeasured splendor in Devaki due to the unification of the families. The footnote says Vayu Purana 1.146 in identical verse reads Vishnor Divya Bhisam Sanam, the divine eulogy of God Vishnu. Vayu Purana 1.148 reads Ekantena. Vayu Purana 1.151 identical with this verse reads 12 wonderful battles between gods and demons. Vayu Purana 1.152 reads Varadanauga Lubdhena, extremely desirous of getting boons. Afterwards, the creative activity of the sages, the description of the creation of the subjects when the war of the Devas and the Asuras started. A woman was slain by Vishnu while protecting Sakra from death, and a curse was obtained by him from Bhrigu. Bhrigu resuscitated the divine mother of Shukra. Due to the concurrence of the Devas and the sages, 12 battles were conducted. Narasimha and others, the destroyers of sins are glorified. The propitiation of Sthanu Shiva by Shukra by means of severe penance. Sarva eulogized by him who was cut off Krita for boons. Afterwards, the material activity of the Devas and the Asuras is recounted. When the noble souled Shukra was attached to Jayanti, the intelligent Brihaspati, assuming the form of Shukra, deluded Asuras, for which act Shukra cursed Brihaspati. The footnote says the corrupt text has resulted in this confused version. It should be as Vayu Purana 1.153 to 154 reads. When the noble souled Shukra was attached to Jayanti, the clever Brihaspati assumed the form of Shukra, deluded Asuras, for which act Shukra cursed Brihaspati. The story of the love affair between Shukra and Jayanti and her subsequent marriage with him are mentioned in other Puranas. White P. page 355, PCK P. 365. The greatness of Vishnu is narrated. It is expressed at the birth, that is incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Turvasu, who was the younger brother of Yadu, was the grandson of Shukra. Anu, Druhyu and others, as well as their sons, who were the kings, are described. The descendants of Anu were noble-souled, excellent kings. Among them are fully described. They had plenty of wealth, and their splendor was much. Atithya, hospitality, to a Brahmanical sage is classified into 7 as resorting to dharma. There the curse of Brihaspati by the poets is described. The fame of Hari's family is slightly touched. Shantanu's prowess is explained. The footnote says the corresponding verse in Vayu Purana 1.158 is as follows. It was Surabhi, the heavenly cow, which uttered the curse. The family of King Jannu is glorified. In the concluding portion, the future kings are recounted. The description of the groups of lords yet to come is given in detail. The description of the annihilation of all when Kali Yuga expires at the end of the Bhautya Manvantara. The annihilation is divided into Naimittika at the end of a Kalpa, Prakritika after 2 Parardha years when Brahma dies, and Atyantika when the individual soul merges in the Brahman. The reabsorption and dissolution of all living beings in various ways is described. Anavrishti, absence of rain, and the terrible Samvartaka, fire of the sun, are mentioned. The description of Prakritika Pralaya is described in the Samkhya system of philosophy. Then Brahman is explained particularly. The description of the 7 worlds beginning with Bhu. The definition is explained by means of Para, Parardha and Apara of the Brahman. The fixation of the extent and magnitude of Brahma in so many yojanas. Here the hells of the sinners such as Raurava etc. are mentioned. The ultimate sequel of all living beings is decisively fixed. The description of the worldly existence through the Prati Samsarga, secondary creation of Brahma. The movement upwards or downwards as dependent on virtue or evil has been mentioned. The annihilation of great bhutas elements in every kalpa. The miseries are innumerable. Even God Brahma is not eternal. The wickedness of worldly pleasures, the pain in the course of worldly existence. The inaccessibility of salvation except through Vairagya, absence of passion because defects are seen. Samhara, amended as samsara, otherwise it would mean pain of annihilation. 1. Abundance the sattva, living beings, whether manifest or unmanifest, and is established in the Brahman. Since multiplicity is sin, the idea of purity of the world recedes. Then the devotee becomes afraid of the three types of tapa, distresses arising from rupa and artha, forms and objects. He then becomes niranjana, unsullied. After obtaining the bliss of Brahman, he is not afraid of anything. The footnote says the corresponding verse in Vaya Purana 1.171 gives a better reading. Then he transcends three types of miseries and he is called formless and free from blemishes, pure. Again, the creation by another Brahma, as before, is recounted. The Vikriyas, changes of the universe, such as creation and annihilation, are described. The activities of the living beings that are born and the fruits they obtain are described. Then the creation of the groups of sages is described. It is destructive of sins. The appearance of Vasishtha and the birth of Shakti, his grasping of the bone of Saudasa as brought about by Vishwamitra, the birth of the eminent Parasara from Adrishyanti, the holy Lord, the great sage, was born of Pitrakanya and the holy sage Parasara, the birth of Suka, the hatred towards sage Vishwamitra of the intelligent Parasara along with his son, the collection of Agni, fire by Vasishtha with a desire to kill Vishwamitra, the hindrance to it by Lord Vidhi Brahma, who was the well-wisher of Vishwamitra, as well as by the intelligent Lord Girnashkandha for the sake of a child. With the blessings of Sharva Shiva, the saintly Lord Vyasa split one Veda of 4 quarters into 4 Vedas. Many branches of the Vedas were evolved by his disciples and their disciples. Defective text, they did not tremble in making practical use of the Vedas. When they were seen by Swambhu Brahma, those excellent sages desirous of dharma and wishing to get a holy place asked him. The Lord, who wished for their welfare, told them like this: the nave of this veil is excellent. Its beauty and splendor is divine. It has 7 spokes. It is incomparable and praiseworthy. As it rolls down, all of you follow it alertly, watchfully. Then you will reach a place where this is broken. That place where the rim of this wheel is broken is a holy land. It should be considered sacred. The footnote says Sauda Shashti Graha Chasya in this text is contrary to facts. It was Saudasa, king Kalmaspada, as a demon who devoured Shakti, Vasishtha's eldest son, at the instigation of Vishwamitra. Hence, the better reading is in Vaya Purana in the corresponding verse 1 to 175a. Vaya Purana 1.178 reads: It the Veda was divided by the intelligent Lord Skanda for the sake of its continuity. A popular etymology of Naimisaranya, wide note to page 8. After saying this to all those sages, he became invisible. The sages of Naimisha forest performed a satra. They are taking only yava, barley, as their food along with the water of Ganga. When Sharadvan died, he was resuscitated as the sages of Naimisha forest were endowed with great kindness. They made this earth boundless. They brought Krishna as king with great pleasure and hospitality. The king was received and honored dearly. Swarbhanu, the cruel Asura, came within the Satra and abducted the king. When the king vanished, the sages followed him. They saw him protected by a Gandharva and abiding in the village named Kalapa. Again, the yajna was begun by the great sages. The footnote says a village in the Himalayas near Badrikashrama where Maru and Devapi, the last kings of the solar and lunar races, respectively performed penance to reappear again as kings of Ayodhya and Hastinapur after Kalki. D. Page 74. On seeing everything golden, he had an argument with them in the Satra that lasted for 12 years and performed by the sages of Naimisha. Yadu was installed by them even as they were arguing. After the son of Yadu, Ayuta was born in the forest. They concluded the Satra and began to worship Vayu. This is the Kritya Sambuddhesha enumeration of contents of the Purana. The part of the Purana has been described. The Purana comes to light in this order alone. Even a great topic is understood easily if mentioned briefly. After mentioning the brief outline, I shall now narrate the details to you. If a person, after conquering the sense organs, learns this first pada section very well, there is no doubt about it that the entire Purana has been understood by him. O Brahmanas, he who knows the four Vedas with their ancillary subjects and the Upanishads must increase his knowledge of Veda through Itihasas and Puranas. The Veda is afraid of a man of incomplete knowledge, saying, "Oh, this man will strike me." Repeatedly learning this chapter that had been directly mentioned by the self-born Lord Brahma, one shall never lose sense after getting into an adversity. He will attain such a goal hereafter as is desired by him. Since this had been in existence before also Pura api, it is remembered as a Puranam. He who understands the etymology interpretation of this is rid of all sins. The footnote says Mahabharat Adi 1.267b to 268a. This is the traditional stand of Puranas regarding their indispensability. It is justifiable to some extent as they preserve the unbroken Brahmanical tradition from the Vedas and are sometimes useful in interpretation, as in Ahalyayai Jaraha Satapatha 3.3.4.18 or Vishwarupam Jaghanendraha Satapatha 1.2.3.2, etc. A popular etymology of the word Purana. Hence, listen to this summary. Narayana creates the world. It is on that occasion of creation when he makes this entire Purana. It does not remain at the time of annihilation.